I call Gillian Genter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Green Party will be supporting this bill at its first reading. The bill, of course, puts into effect the government's commitment to make a contribution to the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is an initiative of China in particular, but has 57 countries signed up to it to be a multilateral investment vehicle that will enable investment in core infrastructure and also areas of potential productive industries across Asia and the Pacific. And there's no question that investment in infrastructure across the world will be necessary to both respond to the big global challenges we are facing, that is climate change and inequality. And when it comes to climate change, there's the potential of infrastructure to reduce pollution and also to help us adapt to the climate change that's already locked in, like sea level rise, increased frequency and severity of storms. It is really critical that we're investing in the right type of infrastructure to address these problems, and it remains to be seen whether or not the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank will be leading on that type of investment. The Global Commission on the Economy and Climate put out a report earlier this year called The New Climate Economy. It had a specific focus on infrastructure. What the report says is that 2015 is a year of unprecedented opportunity, a goal once seen as distant to end extreme poverty, achieve broad-based prosperity, and secure a safe climate altogether is increasingly within reach. And that is exactly what the Green Party is interested in. We must respond to climate change. We must reduce greenhouse pollution. There's no debate about that. And to that end, every piece of infrastructure that we're investing in needs to bring us closer to that goal. And what is increasingly being said by economists across the world is that there's no trade-off between reducing our greenhouse pollution and having an economy that works for people. There's not a big financial cost to reducing our emissions. In fact, there will be an enormous financial cost and consequences to not reducing greenhouse pollution. So that is why climate change in particular is a major priority for the Green Party. And we have high hopes that the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank will be investing in infrastructure that not only enables reliable access to electricity and clean water, sanitation facilities, transport, and urban development, but it does all of this with an eye to reducing greenhouse pollution and achieving greater equality across the world, because ultimately that is going to be better for the economy. And there is a slight risk, right? Because investment in all of these areas of infrastructure, whether it's electricity generation, transport, water, sanitation, and all of that has the potential to reduce pollution and respond to climate change and reduce inequality, or it has the potential to make it worse. This is one of the points that was made by the Global Commission on the Climate and Economy. They said, look, crucial investments will be made over the next 15 years in land use, energy systems, transport. They have the potential to generate multiple benefits for the economy, human development, and the environment, or they could lock countries into high carbon pathways. So it's really critical that this is a major priority for how we prioritize infrastructure investment. And unfortunately, here in New Zealand, the national government is not using that as a lens for how we prioritize investment. And in fact, they're prioritizing a lot of investment in transport infrastructure in particular that not only isn't going to do nothing to reduce the cost of moving people and goods around New Zealand, it's actually going to make our greenhouse gas emissions from transport increase rather than decrease. So that's a real lost opportunity here in New Zealand. But we hope that the Development Bank, because it will be independent and not constrained by the narrow political ideology of the National Party here in New Zealand, will be looking for to seize the global opportunity to actually respond to climate change, reduce inequality, and have an economy that's going to serve people and the environment better. There is some concern because, of course, there have been criticism of some of the policies of the World Bank in the past and the IMF. And of course, the reason, I think the basis of the criticism is that if the decisions are being made primarily by people with linkages to the financial industries, like finance ministers and central bank governors, if they're the only ones at the table, they end up pushing certain policies which do not represent the interests of everybody in the economy, especially workers. And so that's on the basis on which Joseph Stiglitz, for example, criticized some of the policies of the World Bank and has said that we need agencies that are dedicated to development. It's possible for those agencies to be making decisions that benefit everyone in the economy. But if we only have a narrow group of people making the decisions, it's very easy for those decisions to not reflect the interests of everyone in the economy. In fact, to reflect the interests of their connections of people they know who are involved in the financial industries, which are often at odds with the real economy, as we have seen over the past 10 years. But I am relieved to say that if you look at the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, they state up front that their MO, modus operandi, will be to be lean, clean, and green. Lean, small, efficient management, which could be good, but again, we want to make sure that a broad group of people are involved in decision making. Clean, zero tolerance for corruption, and green, an institution built on respect for the environment. So it's on that basis the Green Party is very positive about this development, the possibilities that exist for us to invest in infrastructure that is actually going to reduce pollution, make people's lives better, and start to chip away at the increasing inequality that exists not only in this country, but around the globe. And there is a real opportunity there. I note with interest, I have to agree with the comments from Grant Robertson and David Parker. We do have concerns about the speed with which the bank has been established, and I think that's something that needs to be canvassed during the Select Committee process. It has been unprecedentedly quick. But particularly concerns about where the money is going to come from that New Zealand is contributing, because comments have been made that it's coming from the Future Investment Fund, which of course was the money set aside with the proceeds from the asset sales that National undertook last term. It's not clear that there actually is enough money in the Future Investment Fund to cover all the different promises that they've made. We certainly in the Green Party did not agree with the asset sales. We don't believe that was an intelligent economic policy for New Zealand. We don't believe that it's done anything to reduce our debt, which was one of the bizarre claims made by the government at the time, that it was going to be reducing debt. And of course, the promise that was made was that it would be invested in productive infrastructure for New Zealand, like schools and hospitals and rail. And of course, putting the money in something like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is quite a different proposition to investing in infrastructure here in New Zealand. So it'll be interesting to see where, in fact, the money is going to come from. One final point, Mr. Speaker, is that $125 million is going to be going towards this bank over 5 years. To capitalize it. Before the last election, the Green Party put forward a policy of a green investment bank for New Zealand. And in fact, it was a very similar amount of money. It was $120 million over 3 years that we thought was needed to capitalize a green investment bank here in New Zealand that could then be run on commercial grounds and specialize in investment in clean technology and other infrastructure that's going to help us respond to climate change. And we think that's a great policy. It makes a lot of sense. It's the sort of thing that you would think one would think the National Party would support. Of course, they haven't shown any support for it thus far, but it's interesting that it's a similar amount of money for a similar purpose, although albeit this purpose, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, obviously has wider implications for our relationships with other countries. But there is a case for a green investment bank here in New Zealand to help prioritize the projects that are going to help us have an economy that's going to respond to climate change and allow future generations to prosper well into the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Fletcher.